I guess that means we are live. For those who don't know, my name is Maceo. I go by the ERG Homegirl here on LinkedIn because I'm truly all things ERGs. I'm based here in Detroit, Michigan, originally from Florida. I've been here in Detroit for about 8 years. As it relates to ERGs, I was an ERG leader once upon a time, and then eventually I became an ERG program manager. And then from there, it's been actually coming up in September, 2 years officially that I've been doing this work full time, helping companies all over the world with their ERG programs. 1964, the reason why that year is so important, it was the same year that the Civil Rights Act was passed. Since at the same year that there was like this legal barrier removed, more diverse people could come into the workplace. There was immediately a new problem that was faced, which was like the psychological safety and feeling of being yourself. I do just want to note that if you go on Google, it'll tell you the 70s or something. I literally went to Xerox's ERG Summit last year where they celebrated 60 years. So, as a fact, ERGs have been around for now, it's coming into 61 years. So, not everything we read online is true about ERGs, which is why I do the work that I do because I care about us getting it right. Second ERG community, fun fact, it was actually an Asian American community in the late 60s, also at Xerox. Just a little bit of history there. 1965 to 2019, I call it the spread because, again, that's when we're starting to see different communities get ERGs. A lot of women's ERGs in the 70s, a lot of LGBTQ ERGs in the 80s, Hispanic ERGs starting like late 80s, early 90s. And so nowadays, ERGs, they support people from all backgrounds. Now, 2020, complete game changer in the space. Seemingly overnight, thousands of companies launched their ERG programs. With us launching overnight, it's because we were responding to a need. People were starved for community during the pandemic, but at the same time, they were wanting to be part of something. So I get why the ERGs were launched in response to a need, but oftentimes because it was seemingly overnight, it felt like some steps were missed. Nowadays, the two biggest issues in the space are burnout and low engagement. That's why I call this era the ERG movement, just because I feel like it's time for us to take things to the next level. It's been a couple years since we had this ERG boom. Even then, I had an ERG leader say to me recently, like, it feels like right now it takes a lot more effort to get what we used to have. Like, what used to be really, really easy for us to get, like, takes us so much more now to be able to do the same things. I understand that sentiment on why people would say that. ERGs were easy around this time because it was like a blend of grassroots, and you didn't really have as many high expectations and all these things as a program, but it was kind of like just a vibey space for a second. But now coming out of it, ERGs, they have these high expectations, they have budget, they have all these things, but and because those steps were missed, which we'll talk about shortly what those were, again, we're seeing high burnout, low engagement. Really, I have three messages in particular that I want to help people to get on the same page with. And essentially, throughout the day, we'll be covering these different messages, starting with this keynote, which is literally just going to be to me rapid firing how I have oftentimes set up companies ERG programs. And I say set up, but I should even say reset up is oftentimes the case. This is one of the main things that we do with the ERG movement is we help like restart people's ERG programs so it's on track for success. So I'm going to tell you all how I do that in 90 days so that you can do it in 90 days. Because honestly, I can't help everyone, and I would rather give you the tools to do it if you can. Message number one, I believe ERG programs should operate like a business. If you've been following me for some time, this should be no secret to you. However, I know that over the years, people have been a little bit confused on what I meant by this. So I'm using a restaurant to help us understand what I mean when I say ERGs should run like a business. But to be honest, you could use any business to bring this illustration to life. Now, with a restaurant, let's start and break it down in terms of what that means. A restaurant, they have like a front end and a back end. They have the area that the customers see, the area that the customers interact with, and like they look at the menu and all the stuff. And then they have the back end where all the operations happen and the cooking happens, if you will. In the same way, ERG programs have a front end and a back end. We have the area where the members interact, which is typically like our communications channel. Then we have on the back end all the planning that goes into it, the operations of our ERG program. So I want us to think about it kind of like in that frame. And even then, if we were to visualize present day, how our back ends of our kitchens look right now, oftentimes it's something like this. Now, it's not for every company. Food, that's like our programming. In the same way that our actual food is meant to nourish a customer, well, our programming is meant to nourish our members. ERG leaders, home cooks slash chefs. I say home cooks because honestly, there's a skill required to actually become a chef. Yes, you might have the ability to cook informally and for friends and family. In the same way, ERG leaders occasionally might be able to do some programming that's good for their community. But there's also a skill set needed to actually be a chef, a professional community facilitator. When you think about it, chefs have to go through chef school to gain this skill. And in the same way, the skills for ERG leaders is community facilitation, something that I had never heard about in the space before. Honestly, it just kind of dawned on me one day. We're not teaching ERG leaders how to be community facilitators. And that's a huge issue. I also know why we do it, because there's a huge misconception in the space that just because we identify with the community facilitation part comes easy. Oh, they identify, so they're subject matter experts. They should always be able to come up with engaging things. Well, that's simply not true. We have to teach our ERG leaders how to actually lead a community. It's one of the biggest gaps in the ERG space right now. We'll talk more on that later. And ERG program managers, well, they're like the restaurant owners. I say this because there's two very different skill sets when it comes to running a restaurant and being the chef. This is why I don't know if you've seen shows like Kitchen Nightmares or Bar Rescue, where there's like someone who's maybe really good at cooking, but they're not good at the business of the restaurant, and therefore their restaurant suffers. In the same way, I mean, again, chefs, they focus on just cooking, and the restaurant owners, they're the ones who handle hiring, who handle budget, who handle all that stuff. Two completely different sets of skills. And right now, there's a thought that ERG leaders should be handling the operations of their ERG programs. Unless you're a major company with over 200,000 employees and here have massive ERG, your ERG leaders probably should not be taking on the operations of your ERG program, because who has the bandwidth? They already barely have the bandwidth to actually do community facilitation work. And again, they're also two different skill sets. So this is truly going to be the process of them building the plane while trying to fly it, which is actually where a lot of folks are at right now when it comes to their ERG program. So these are just things that I'm seeing here in the space, and program managers over the operations of the ERG program. And that kind of paints the picture. This is why I'm using the concept of the ERG recipe tour. We'll break this down a little bit more, but that is essentially what I mean when I talk about our ERG programs like a business. Every business has a front end and back end. They have people who do the work, and then they have the people who run the business. And we all have something that we provide to our customers. That's the goal. All right. Thing number two, I want to say operationalizing community facilitation for ERG leaders. I say it's one of the highest ROI moves that an ERG program manager can make. What do I mean? So we're making it easy for ERG leaders to be community facilitators. Doing that is going to be a game changer for your program. Right now, it's very difficult for ERG leaders to actually do the work, to be a volunteer. The easier we make this, the easier it's going to be for people to deliver. And then also, recipes, the future of ERG initiatives, at least hopefully. Recipes, what that basically means with the ERG recipe book, it's basically saying in the same way that if you have a recipe for food, it's a way for you to consistently deliver high quality food over and over to your customers. In the same way, recipes for ERG leaders, it's a way for us to consistently deliver high quality programming to our ERG members. It means that we're documenting how our programming is executed. This way we can repeat it over and over again. I'll do one of many plugs of the ERG recipe book. Look at this thing. It's like a textbook, and it's full of different ideas and ways to execute said ideas. Internally, you should be tracking the different types of event formats and programming formats that your ERG program does and how to execute better. This way, consistently, other ERGs can even reference and say like, hey, they did a trivia. How do we execute on a trivia? Like, what are the steps to do it? And this way, it doesn't feel like herding cats to get work done if everything is documented. So Anyway, I will just say high level. Again, I'm trying to get to the good stuff here. Said we want our kitchens to not look like this. We want it to look probably something more like this. And this is what the process of making ERGs easier looks like. And solving for a lot of these pain points based and visualize where we're at on a chart. I would say we're high effort and low engagement right now. If we were more efficient, that means decreasing the effort, but still having like relatively low engagement, which is better that we are like making things easier for ERG leaders. But if we're just making it easier for ERG leaders, but we're not actually gaining engagement, that's not really the win we're looking for. So, what I like to say is we're trying to optimize things, which means that we're getting way more engagement and still way less effort. That is kind of like the process that I'm trying to visualize here. For me, this is actually what it looks like to scale an ERG, going from high effort, low engagement to optimized, high engagement, low effort. To me, that is what it means to scale an ERG. And this is where we're at in the space right now, where there's a lot of work needed to scale. Even then, I like to sometimes define scale in the context of business because I think ERG programs should run like businesses. So this is where we get into the heavy teaching. So in the business world, defining scale means to increase revenue at a faster rate than our cost. Well, how does this make sense to ERGs? Well, let me put it simply. That would mean that we are increasing our outcomes at a faster rate than our inputs. All right. Are we tracking here? One more layer. This means for us, we're increasing member engagement and impact, however we define that at our company, without exhausting our time as ERG leaders. And even I say budget because yes, you might be able to have a ton of member engagement, but with infinite budget. Well, we have to work with what we have and get the most out of what we have already. This is essentially what it means to scale as a fact. So again, if we were to visualize that, that means that we are increasing engagement on that chart and decreasing effort. Okay. I'm saying this like 10 times over and over because this seems to be a huge kind of like pain point in the space when people think about, well, what does it mean to take our ERG to the next level? Does it mean BRGs and all these things, which if you know, you know. I'm not going to get into the full ramble today. I will later talking about BRGs, but not right now. Really, again, for our inputs, we want to make it easier, clarify for ERG leaders, document. And then for our outcomes, we want more engagement. The framework that I use to help people execute this, the 3 Ps of ERGs, a framework comes from the business world. In the business world, it's people, process, product. In the ERG space, I like to say purpose, process, programming. Purpose, understanding why your ERG program exists, what's in scope versus what's out of scope, having a clear metric of success, and also having a strategy that really bakes out where you're at now, where you want to be in the future, and year over year, how you get there. All that is part of the purpose. Process is how your ERG leaders execute. I always say if I were to go volunteer at a food bank, they're not just going to tell me to go do, they're going to tell me what to do, how to do it, and they're going to make it easy for me to be a volunteer. And right now, it is not easy to be an ERG leader. Not to mention, I mean, data is another part of process, and the data right now in the ERG space is honestly atrocious. Like, we can do a lot better. Like, I go by the ERG homegirl. I don't know if we've met, but if you have not, just know I'm going to keep it real with you. But I just feel like that's just the best way that I could possibly deliver information is just to keep it real. Programming, that's around the product of our ERG programs, our events, our initiatives, our communications. What's interesting about these 3 Ps is that while they're meant to be attacked in order, most companies, again, back in 2020, they skipped over the first 2 Ps entirely. They just started with programming. Like, hey, we have an ERG program. What are we posting? What events are we doing? That's why there's a lot of burnout in the space today and a lot of low engagement is because, again, those 3 Ps have to be attacked in order. Even then, what's interesting is that what we just touched on around programming is really around the community facilitation part. So it's interesting that a lot of companies skip straight to, hey, what events are we doing? Again, without providing their ERG leaders the skill of community facilitation, the skill of doing good programming. This is why we see low engagement in the space right now. I'll say to that list that we listed earlier, all the pain points that people rank and talk about, really, they can all be solved with the 3 Ps. And knowing which P to focus on is incredibly helpful. So feel free, take a screenshot here just to kind of identify, hey, here's my target, here's my issues that I'm trying to address. But honestly, this is a really good starting point for you. What does it look like to actually execute and to improve our 3 Ps? So this is where I'll go into the 5 steps that I take to help companies all over the world to improve their ERG programs. I'm giving this to you all because this is the work that needs to be done with ERGs at thousands of companies right now. Thing number one, identify or diagnose the problem and identify the solution. What do I mean when I say this in particular? Just checking Gwendolyn, with the ERG leaders who won't release control. This is a real thing, and that's actually a perfect segue to this part here. When I say diagnose the problem, there's a couple of actually, I have to say it. I'm saving this for later too, but I will just say something important that I brought up in an ERG meetup last week. There's a huge part, and it ties in with this that we have to discuss. I think I'm really talking about ERGs a lot differently lately. Even when I define them, there's a standard definition that we always see where it's like, it's a company sponsored, employee led program. And I think the reality is that through 2020 and that era, once ERGs began to become formal and again have expectations, have designated budget, have even in some cases like a designated program manager. No, this is no longer an employee-led program, in my opinion. And like I said, I wasn't really going to speak on this till later, but I do think that it's relevant. Right now, ERGs, if the company is giving you processes, if it's giving you the data, if it's giving you the budget, this is no longer employee-led. If it's requiring OKRs or do program that's based on different areas, this is not an employee-led program anymore. Yes, it's done with the employees in mind. That's why I've been a big fan of talking about ERGs as employee-powered programs versus employee-led programs. So I think that that's a definition that you'll start seeing me talk about more in the future, but employee powered over employee led, which would mean that yes, there are some ERG leaders who might want to maintain hold of an ERG because they view it as their ERG. But as part of this shift, the uncomfortable thing that needs to be done is that we have to reframe the ERG program as, hey, this is not something that you just own and do your own thing and have the option to listen to us or not. This is an ERG program that is a company program, employee powered, but it's company led nowadays. And that's the reality. If anything, that's what I would say is a BRG. Like if you had to put a BRG on anything, the thing that I would probably would probably be a ERG. So an employee community that is given structure, budget, data by the business, given a framework by the business. Maybe that's what some people do view an ERG as. Again, if you know my take, there are some other companies who view BRGs, meaning that the ERG program needs to make the business money, and that's why it's a BRG, and that's how it becomes formal or beneficial. There's a lot of legal things around that. There's a lot of legal experts also wouldn't agree with that, especially for a lot of the thing that we're trying to get our ERG programs to consult on. Again, more on that later. Nevertheless, I'm talking about ERG programs differently. And I think that's a really good segue into what I'm going to say here. Diagnose the problem, identify the solution. When I talk about diagnosing the problem, you need to do a listening tour with your ERG leaders. I like to do this individually with different ERG leaders. People feel more comfortable speaking one-on-one. Really understand what are the things that take up a lot of time for you? What are the things that you haven't had clarity on? What are the blockers, essentially? From there, I also like to take inventory. This is something actually newer that I'm doing. And if you are a program manager and if you're going to be on the program manager meetup that we have later, then you will learn a little bit on what that means and even get a special template on how you can take inventory with your ERG program. It's been incredibly helpful since I've started using it with companies. And also a full documentation audit. That means that you have to take a hard look at what exists, a documentation audit, just to see, is this information actually helpful to leads? Or do we need more? Or do we need it reformatted? How can we leverage AI? Identifying the solution means that you have to clarify the vision of your program. Why does your program exist? Right now, if you were to ask your ERG leaders, would you get the same answer with all your ERG leaders? Probably not, which I get, but you know better, now you can do better. And that means we have to have a very clear statement on what our ERG program serves to do, not some lengthy paragraph mission statement, which I oftentimes see mission and vision that actually means nothing to anybody. So then we're just like doing stuff for the sake of doing it. Make it very clear. We are here to help employees feel a sense of belonging. We are here to help people. Also, clear success metrics and indicators. This one is a really important. What does it look like for this program to be successful? What does success look like and how we take our program to the next level. We'll talk more about that. I was going to do this whole illustration where I talk about the benefits of a vision statements as part of this. I'll still do it, but we really don't have that much time. I will just say there was a famous swimmer trying to swim across the Catalina Channel. First woman to do it. First time she attempted, she failed. And what was so sad is she had swum almost 20 miles. And when she gave up, it was like really foggy. So supposedly she couldn't see. But when she ended up giving up, she was like a mile away from shore, which was like super disappointing. The second time she did it, she said she was able to make it because she saw the destination in her mind. Like she knew it was accomplishable. That's like the whole point of that. Why do I bring that up for our ERG leaders? In the same way, they oftentimes can't see what our ERG program is meant to do. We've never articulated it to them. If we just have it in word jumble, that doesn't mean much to many people. So in the same way, we have to have a clear vision. Long story short, the longer we wait to define what the shore is, what that end goal is for our ERG programs, the more ERG leaders that we will lose. And I've heard a lot of ERG leaders saying, it's just not worth my time anymore. And that's oftentimes a big part of saying there hasn't been that clarity, not even given to me, much less my manager or executives. No one has that clarity. And that's on program managers to define. But nevertheless, making sure that we are focused when it comes to our vision. Right now, there are a lot of distractions coming towards ERG programs, and like consulting on things that we shouldn't be consulting on, getting our ERG leaders to be advocates for better benefits and policy, which we talked about in an earlier session. We definitely don't want ERG leaders to be functioning as illegal unions, which a lot of ERGs are. So we just have to be able to commit to say, hey, if our ERGs are designed to help our employees to feel an increased sense of belonging, then that means that we have to say no to anything out of scope. And right now, there's a lot of people who have issues saying no to things that are out of scope with their ERG program because they are struggling with like defining the ROI to their program. So then we just take everything on and hope that makes it valuable, which is not true. Actually, by saying no, that's what makes it valuable. Step number 2, create a strategy. When it comes to strategy, there's a huge issue in the space right now where, let me just define it. I like to work in definitions. If you were to define a strategy, a plan of action designed to achieve a major aim, even in the concept of war, notice the words here: directing, the art of planning and directing overall military operations and movements. Okay, notice why I'm saying this. A strategy, simple terms, planned movement over time to help you win. That is basically what the definition just said. So we can see. That means that even then, if you were to talk about it like in like a strategic, I don't want to say like, well, like that's the definition. That means you're saying, here's where we are. Here's the goal that we want. Here's everyone's role in this plan. Here is our current phase, and here's the immediate next step, and here's how you'll know we're ready for the next step. Okay, that's literally what a strategy is. Here we need a phase development plan, operational scope, that's the roles part, success indicators, a clear path of what our current step is and our next step. A strategy is not a set of categories. I talk to a lot of ERG program managers, and I even do coaching with some ERG program managers. I'll ask people, what is your ERG program strategy? And they'll say, we have these 4 pillars or the 3 W's or something like that. I really struggled for a long time, like how I was going to tell people, but that's not a strategy. I know how much work we put into those decks and all the approval we had to get, But having categories is not a strategy. We just defined a strategy, to be clear, and the things that it must have. Right now, that is simply not enough. And again, it's actually hurting a lot with our ERG program overall. I wrote this note down. So I would just want to read it directly because it's going to be easier. But right now, you have a list of things that you want your ERGs to focus on, but that's not a strategy. A real strategy shows you how you plan to develop those things over time, what behaviors you expect to change, and how you'll know it's working. With that, we're just spinning in place. And that's why our ERG program is not really growing. And all of a sudden, again, we just want to slap a BRG label on it and say, hey, we have this and now we're making processes. So we're mature now, where that's not true. You still just have categories and you haven't baked out a developmental growth plan with success indicators and even clear roles a lot of ERG programs are missing right now. So I just want to bring that up. That's why I created the ERG movement model, completely free. I know this might feel overwhelming to see, but I do just want to explain what this is very simply. If I was to put it in the simplest way, while the model has 5 phases, think about it in 3. 1, for infancy, this is the work that you do before the ERG program launches. Adolescence, that's the middle, that is the growth phase. Maturity, this is when your ERG program is at its vision, like when you're actually achieving all the goals. And again, we're thinking about what it means to scale. We're doing it at a low lift to ERGs and we're getting high engagement, which means that we're measuring things and getting good results at a low lift. Low lift would actually mean that your program is autonomous, as in you probably won't even need someone to be super hands-on with the ERG program anymore, which isn't that what we all want? We don't necessarily want to have to babysit ERGs all the time, but that's just the state right now because we haven't done the growth work or set up our ERG program for success. And this is the 3 Ps. So this is where you do that purpose process programming and you get your program together. You're doing these 5 steps too. Early adolescence, that's the first 6 months after your program launches. I call it like that stabilization period. Some things might break, but this is where you're figuring out what's working essentially. Mid adolescence, 2 to 4 years, you need a period of sustained success where you're getting wins over time. It's great if your ERG program works and your processes are working. But then when that next set of ERG leaders comes in, if it all comes crashing down, that means that some things were still broken. So this really appears to make sure things are still working. Sustained success with gradual increases in our metric goals and our outcomes, essentially. Late adolescence, this is when you take the program to the next level, whatever that means. Maybe that means we need chapters. Maybe that means we get more ERGs. Maybe that means we're doing more robust programming with our ERG. The concept here, and something that I say often, is that you don't scale mess. Right now, that's exactly what's happening. We just think, oh, our ERG program's broken. We just need to scale and do more robust programming where we have not actually gone through this period. And it's okay. ERG program development takes time, takes years. It's more than okay. And it's actually the healthiest way to grow and to develop an ERG program. Reason why I'm so adamant about this is because how are we ever going to get our program on track for success if we don't pause and realize that we don't have a development plan laid out for our groups? We don't have that vision that this is where we want our ERG programs to be in the future. That's why right now a lot of ERG leaders feel like, what am I doing? We haven't explained the end goal. Infancy is the work you do before your ERG program launches. Early adolescence to late adolescence, those are the development pieces. So that's like the growth part. Early is the first 6 months after you launch, really where you're kind of stabilizing. Mid adolescence, 2 to 4 years of sustained success of your program. A lot of times we get 1 or 2 wins with our ERG program and we want to take our ERGs to the next level. Like, no, let's make sure that we're able to be consistently hitting metrics and gradually increasing kind of what we're trying to hit on. And late adolescence is when you scale. So when you take your program to the next level, whatever that means for your company, different things at different companies. Maybe it's growing, a new chapters. Maybe it's expanding to new markets. Maybe now employees who weren't eligible before, maybe some hourly or frontline employees, now they're eligible to participate. Whatever that means, you scale after you have proven sustained success. This model adopted from the business world. I don't make up most of the stuff I talk about. I just talk about frameworks that have already been proven, and I'm just trying to bring it to us so we can use what already works versus a bunch of random frameworks. If our strategy right now is just different pillars or categories, that's not a strategy. It's just categorizing things that you want your leads to do. A strategy has to identify where you're at, where you want to be, the roles everyone plays in getting you where you want to be, how you know that you're ready for the next step. All that's part of the strategy, and that's what exists in the ERG movement model. All this is free, by the way, on the ERG Movement website. You'll be able to access details about the ERG Movement model. I actually just redid this recently because I wanted to make it even easier for everyone to understand and for you to actually plan your strategy with the ERG Movement model. Other things that I want to note, we talked a little bit about what it means to scale before. I'm visualizing that same thing here again, how we were talking about we want to move the graph so it's less work, more engagement. This is also what it looks like when it comes to the ERG movement model. Yes, we kick off with a lot of work and probably not a lot of engagement or impact, whatever you define impact as. But over time, the idea is that we're able to have less of a lift, more impact over time. So this is what I say when I say this is what it means to scale your program. Now, what I know for a fact is that most companies, if I had to tell you where you're at in this, and this is going to hurt some feelings, a lot of companies will tell me, oh, we're in early adolescence or mid adolescence because, well, we obviously already launched, so we can't be in infancy. That most programs are here. And you might be like, well, what does that mean? Well, I talk about this a little bit. I actually wrote an article about this, and there's a ton of information on the ERG movement site around it. But it's actually a secret phase that I like to call broken adolescence. Well, what do I mean when I say broken adolescence? Think about it like this. You launched your ERG program, and I have this illustration in the article. It's like if you're trying to fly a plane, but the plane's half built, like it's not really ever going to take off and get off the runway. In that same way, our ERG programs, yes, they launched, but we didn't do the first two P's and even struggled with the third P as well. I won't say we failed, but we're struggling with engagement, which means there's a problem with that third P, which is programming. Basically, our program is half built, trying to take off, trying to go through development when we never even finished building it in the first place. So that's why I oftentimes tell people that what we have to do is go back to infancy from this broken place. And then from there, we can develop in a healthy way. Just like a plane, it would have to go back to the jet bridge. And then from there, it can get fixed and take off. Same exact concept for our ERG programs. And this is the work that is needing to be done for a lot of companies. Okay, cool. Continuing on. Step number 3. Now, I used to say build processes, but I actually don't agree. It's not that I think that build processes is bad, but I don't think that that is robust enough for what I've been trying to say here. Processes, we'll talk about it. They're cool in that when you have a SOP, so standard operating procedure, where basically it's a hefty document of all the how-tos for your ERG program, which is great. Most companies don't have it. And even the companies who have some form of a handbook it's very high level. So it's not granular enough to answer questions that leaders have. How do we pay for this thing? Not saying, oh, go to the budget tracker, but no, step by step. Here's the link to our procurement space. The first step is you have to issue a PO. Here's all the steps to issuing a PO. From here, like that step-by-step process of documenting things, it's a headache, and I get it. It's the boring stuff. But in the business world, they say when it comes to the boring stuff, the money is in the mundane. The same concept exists here. A lot of the value of our program, especially going back to thing number 2 I talked about before, which was if we operationalize community facilitation for ERG leaders, which in simple terms means making it easy for them. That is the biggest thing that we can do. So building out Comprehensive processes for our ERG leaders is the best thing we can do. Quick red flag on this, which I haven't mentioned in any of the sessions I've done, but I do think it's worth saying now. Yes, there are ways in which you can build this easily using AI. I encourage it actually. AI is going to keep it high level and use a lot of filler language, which means nothing to anybody. We need to make this so easy that a brand new employee, like a brand new intern, could come in and be an ERG leader because everything is documented and how they do everything. Honestly, even more recently, what I've been doing with companies is saying I have to build the processes for the ERG program manager. The program manager should have the things that they do documented. If someone else comes, like let's say you move on to a different role, your program's going to come crashing down if people don't know how to maintain it. We need to build this stuff out. And I get this is time consuming. You're probably like, where do I have the time for this? It's that I will say I do this for companies. Just saying. But even outside of that, start somewhere. Here's what I'll say when it comes to our processes. Another major issue that I see is that it's sometimes we have overcomplicated things for leads. Like we've added things to the process that are not necessary. Maybe it's just something that we do because it's been done. An example of that, this is charters. Look, don't attack the messenger. Well, I guess I did make the video, but I'm just saying charters is one of those things like it's something that like historically has been done, but I don't think that in present day, especially based on what we talked about before we hopped over to Zoom, where ERG programs, they're governed, company governed. I think I like that company governed employee powered programs. Nevertheless, I don't think that they require a charter. I think that you can have a document, a handbook. That's like the big spoiler alert of the video. Outside of me talking about what I don't like about charters and how they're a huge waste of time, especially when all your ERG programs should be following the same set of processes. But even then, if you have a handbook, you don't need a charter. I say all that to say we need to make the process simple for leaders. We need to remove friction for ERG leaders, making things easy, simple. I really like this quote: simplicity takes more work than complexity. Complexity is a child of lazy thinking. It's easy actually to have something be complicated and say, well, at least it's written down. It actually takes a lot more work to say, how do I make this easier for other people? That is the work that's needing to be done right now in the ERG space. I also mentioned, I believe ERG should run like businesses. A form of business that I really like as an example is a nonprofit. It's the same concept. They're still volunteers who are doing things. They're entrusted to do high level things as volunteers and to get some big stuff done. If I were to go work at a food bank, I'm literally handling food. I can get people sick. Anyone can go volunteer at a food bank because they make it really easy for you to be a volunteer. Another example, if Habitat for Humanity is problematic at all, I am sorry. I just picked a nonprofit. This is one where I will say, hypothetically, with the concept of it, where they build houses for people, just about anybody can come and participate in building someone a house, which is like a highly skilled task because things are documented. You have clear roles, you have instructions, they provide the tools, like they make it really, really easy for you to be a volunteer and do some highly skilled things. And I just love this example. I do have to research and make sure it's not problematic, but in general, I love this example of what they do for their volunteers and why they're so successful. And I feel like this is the same principles that we need to be applying to our internal volunteer program, aka our employee community program, ERG. Your system should do the heavy lifting, not your ERG leaders. Right now, again, ERG leaders is being put on them to do the operations of their ERG program and figure everything out. And that is a huge mistake. We should be building a system. It's not just about processes. Even going processes, that would just be step-by-step instructions, but they go a step further. They don't just have, here's a handbook, and now you're good to be a volunteer and do just about all these roles that are highly skilled. No, it's not just a set of step-by-steps that need to get done. A system, and I don't have the language yet to make it like super simple, but what I will say is like a system is like an ecosystem and that multiple things are happening. That's interesting. Ecosystem. But anyway, a system means that things are moving, things are happening, essentially. So It's not just, hey, here's the things that need to get done, but here's who needs to do it, which is why I like roles that are based around tasks rather than pillars. Like, I am not a fan of I don't know, community pillar. That's like a popular one where it's like, well, what does that mean? What's the set of tasks that make up this role essentially? So, clear roles that are task based, and this is how it's done in the nonprofit space. Clear roles coupled with step by step instructions, coupled with guidance, on the spot guiding, which means proper onboarding for your leaders, coupled with tools and materials that help people get it done. For us in the ERG space, we do have tools such as, hey, here's the trackers that you would need, or nowadays, AI tools, or it could even be things like the ERG Idea Hub, which is free, over 10,000 examples of ERG programming. That's a tool for an events lead to learn about what else is going on. I would even, dare I say that the recipe book is a tool for ERG leaders. And this could work for actually multiple different roles within an ERG. But nevertheless, we're providing them the tools and materials needed to execute. We're making it easy for them to do the thing. It's kind of meaningless if you're saying, hey, you're supposed to be the person who builds the roof and you don't provide a hammer. Again, you're just making it hard for to be a volunteer at that point. And in that same way, while it sounds silly, that's exactly what's being done in the ERG space. Your system should do the heavy lifting, data collection and visualization. This is step number 4. This is big, but data is kind of atrocious right now in the ERG space. Right now, everyone's pretty much just measuring number of members, number of event attendees, and maybe like an occasional survey. So there's a lot of work needing to be done with data, even for most ERG softwares out here. And I mean, like, pretty much all, if I'm being honest. I am not a fan of their data. I took a look. I am personally not a fan. I feel like we can do better in the ERG space than just showing those metrics. Let me tell you all what needs to be done when it comes to your data. Thing one, obviously, you need to have it. If you don't have data, then you don't care. That's just what I'm saying. How are you ever supposed to improve something where you never actually knew where you started? Moving forward, as people ask me, hey, how do we increase X part? The real question is, do you know where you're starting at right now? Where if people told me, how do we get more people to talk in our communications channel? Like, how do we increase engagement there? Well, what's your current communications engagement score? If you want to increase engagement, well, what's your current member engagement score? Because this way I can get a good feel of where you're at. What's the percentage you're trying to increase by? Like, we don't have any of this data. And let me say this differently, we are not currently tracking this data when we do have it. Everyone has access to the things that I'm talking about here. So there's no reason for us to not. And that's why I say you just must not care if you don't have the data. Or maybe sometimes we're afraid of the data because we know our data is bad, but it's okay. I'm telling you, I've worked with companies where they see their data for the first time. It's a downer for a second, but it also gives an easy way for you to have a good amount of growth. If you start low, the only way you can go is up, really. So that means that you'll have a higher percent increase the lower it is. So that's the way to spin low engagement, just to pull the data. Measurement is like a form of intervention, and we definitely need more. So if you want to improve anything, you have to measure it first. Data is also kind of like your coordinates. I really like this example where if you were to try to get to a location, it's going to be helpful for me to know exactly where you're, like if you're trying to get to downtown Detroit and I don't have your coordinates, or at least roughly where you're located, it's going to be very hard for me to direct you to downtown Detroit. If you want to go anywhere with your ERG program, even when it comes to growth and development, you need data to be your success indicator on when you're ready to go to the next level. We're currently not measuring a lot, and data does align with the 3Ps. It's not a coincidence because these are frameworks that have been widely adopted for probably about a century. Now, outside of having data, another part is to visualize it, because we can't just have our data in charts and sheets, which is what we have it in right now. So how do we actually make it so that you can tell a story with data? The next part is to visualize it. This is a piece of a dashboard that I have built on Looker Studios. I will put this into the chat for you all here. Looker Studio for Google. And then let's see, Power BI for Teams. Those are free tools that you can use to measure actually visualize your data. I am not a data person. I learned it on YouTube University, which means for free on YouTube, how to use these soft tools. So just know that this is relatively easy for you to build. Not to mention, it's even easier because I have templates. This is the data some collection system template. So as you can see here, I have everything here on what you need to measure, how to get it, your email templates if you need help, how to format it in a doc. I also have video tutorials and the actual sheets that you can download. I'm really trying to make this as easy as possible for you all to get the data. Once you have it in that sheet, you can then move it into a place like this. That's the goal. Once we have our sheets, then we can move it over. Yes, I will say Viva Engage has pretty good metrics. When we get to the communications engagement portion later, I can talk a little bit about that. But Viva Engage is the only one that actually shows you your metrics without you having to calculate it, which is such a wonderful thing. If you put it into that tracker that I just listed, and if you all want to know how to get that, I will get that pulled up for you so you can have the link so you can check out that template. And it's free. Again, I'm here to give you resources in the space. So I'm popping this in the chat here. That is the link, and you can grab that for free. So you have to visualize the data. That's the important part here. We do have a service with the ERG movement where we build your dashboard for you. Historically, ERG softwares have had horrid metric. If you know me, you know I'm not really a big fan of ERG softwares. However, there is one that I think I'm finally getting through to. More on that, where I can say, hey, at least this one place has a dashboard already built into it. So I will say there's hope in case you're just like, we just don't have the bandwidth to build it on our own. All right, I'm almost done here. So visualize the data. Step 5, obviously, after you have the data, you have the processes. Again, we're having the things that we need as part of our solution. Well, this is when you now have to onboard your leaders. You probably have ERG leaders already, but you have to get them in line with this version of the program, which is this company governed, people powered program. Different train of thought for a lot of leads. So you're going to have to onboard them. And personally, I like to do 15-minute calls with leaders. Honestly, because I have all this laid out really easily, it's probably going to be a 5-minute call where I say, hey, I just want to make sure you don't have questions. Here's what the program is. Here's why it exists. Here's your role. Here's your monthly checklist. And here's the data points that you can reference in a couple of resources. Have any questions? Most of the time, they say no. I've had leads be like, this was like the quickest and most efficient call to really change my perspective on something. It just made me feel really proper onboarding. When for me means individual one-on-one calls, but also collective recap, do best practices. This is where you actually teach your ERG leaders community facilitation. That's not something that just lives in processes, but this is where you do some sort of train with your leads on what it looks like, best community facilitation practices. ERG movement shops are done currently. I have at least 3 a week. But the point is, you do need to teach your ERG leaders community facilitation just to make it easy for them to lead. Because again, it doesn't come inherently for a lot of us. This is how you can take your kitchen, your ERGs back. If you follow these 5 steps, the goal is that you're able to take it to something like this. Honestly, it can be done in 90 days. Even more recently, I've been able to do it in 45 days, which is pretty cool. But I do say that more to say it can be done if you just create that plan of how, like, create that 5 steps and set aside the time to execute it. And once it's done, you don't have to do it again. That's when that's the process of what it looks like to go back into infancy and fix your program. This way, your program can develop the healthy way.